Welcome, world, to Rex Arthur TV. This is the Rex Arthur Show where we discuss LGBTQ issues with an LGBTQ perspective and an LGBTQ approach and a humanistic approach in an LGBTQ plus planet where each and every one of us belongs to on one letter or two letters in the sexual alphabet, the 10-letter sexual alphabet, LGBTQIAAP. And I hope you're enjoying your life, even though sometimes life can be challenging, even in your sexual identity. But a luta continua. We go on, the struggle continues. And today we want to discuss the colonialism and its effect on on legal or laws, legal systems, and its effect on pro and anti LGBTQ legislation, and this against the backdrop of the Kenya having to repeal the 162 section 162 of the Penal Code, just like India did it for section 177 of the Penal Code of India. And of course India succeeded, and we are very hopeful that Kenya will also succeed in repealing the law because of what we're going to discuss. Of course, the problem of cases is there is what you call sub judice, but I think we can still discuss it right now because we are only waiting for the judgment, the hearing. When a case is under sub judice, it is when it is in session. But right now, it's not in session. We're just waiting for judgment. So we are free to discuss it about that law. All right. So repeal 162, of course, we're going to visit it, but I want you to understand something about colonization. Colonization is a very powerful system of power and government. Contrary to what we think about colonization, I can call colonization. First of all, colonization is a form of government. Let's read this, and this is the best definition. I like it already. Colonialism is the policy of a foreign polity seeking to extend or retain its authority over other people or territories, generally with the aim of opening trade opportunities. Now, what I like about this statement is the word foreign. Foreign polity, seeking to extend. It is not a local polity. So, you have to understand, every country in the world has a government. To be a legitimate government is to mean a legal government. It is in place because of elections or because of kingdom. Now, these are legitimate governments. The local government is an authority, but there are cases whereby foreign authorities can take over local authorities for economic reasons. Most countries, what does this mean? Colonization does not really happen for cultural reasons. That's what you need to understand. Colonization does not happen for to some extent, colonization can happen for many reasons. Yes, it can happen for cultural reasons, because cultural reasons mean religious reasons. It can be political, it can be economic, but majorly it's majorly economic, because the understanding is when I have a very large territory, I will have a lot of money, I will have a lot of land. You see, that's how a colonialist. Can you imagine if you colonized Egypt in the ancient time? Egypt was a country that had a lot of gold together with Sudan. So if you colonized Egypt and Sudan, believe you me, you have the gold of that country. Which is why in Africa, land law and land rights is extremely important. And people have been fighting, and it has always been an issue. Zimbabwe has collapsed because of their land policy, you know. And South Africa is carefully, surgically solving their land problems, because land is wealth and land is limited, it's scarce. And the more humans increase in the world, the more we'll have more problems, because land is not increasing. I written a book about to solve the problem of land scarcity, and I said in that book we should build skyscrapers, everything, hospitals, skyscraper hospitals, school skyscrapers, university skyscrapers, you know, residential skyscrapers, so that we can forget land. And only land that has minerals, we could now go and do digging from them. But generally, let humans now start living in the sky through skyscrapers. And then, if you remember the Jetsons, the cartoon, very beautiful cartoon. I believe it's very futuristic. I'm even going to try and look at it again. And the Jetsons had a very nice design of the world. That the tubes, tunnels, they were air tunnels connected to various skyscrapers, extremely tall skyscrapers the Jetsons had. And then they even had, remember, the tall saucer skyscraper, because sometimes skyscrapers don't have to be floors of buildings. You can just have an elevator that is a tall obelisk elevator, and then it takes you to the flat house that is on top of that elevator. But the problem of that building, such a building, is that imagine having a very 2-kilometer elevator, and then it's taking you to only one floor. I mean, it's a bit it's a bit wasting of air. So to make use of the space, you can build a skyscraper, or you can build a very small elevator, and then from that elevator you have buildings, then another elevator, then you have buildings on top of those elevators. So there are very many ways we can design skyscrapers. So basically, I'm just trying to say the world may need to change its way of living to live in skyscrapers. Because land is becoming scarce the more humans exist in the earth. Because you see, if the richer people are becoming richer, and that's a disaster. Because when people become richer, they are able to buy land. Now, the game that countries do play is, when the rich people are increasing, the land prices increase. Because if the land prices remain where they are, the rich people are increasing, the land will become so scarce, within a short time a country's land will be gone. So what happens? There will be no more purchase of land, and when that has happened, a country has become a feudal country. I think Europe is already feudal and has been feudal for thousands of years. Reason being, they really did land distribution very fast, and that's why they have monarchies, very organized. So they keep them. Now, what happened when they had very organized government, the land was already distributed. That's why most kingdoms are colonialists. They colonize. Why they colonize territory? They have already used their territory. They have already organized their territory. It's gone. So when you go to Europe, I was even discussing with a friend, and I was asking her, and she was telling me she's married to a French man, and she was saying that I was asking her, do you have land? Have you ever got land in Europe? And she told me, and she said, I'm saying this publicly because it's on Twitter, in public domain. So nobody can accuse me of divulging secrets. I don't divulge secrets. I only divulge what is in public. So even anything that you talk to me on Facebook, I will show you. I will talk about it because that's public domain. It's in my account, so I'm free to share. And Twitter is very public. There is no blocking of followers, at least for my account. So anyway, she was saying that they have land somewhere in Europe, and I was arguing. The argument people are having in South Africa is that it's not easy for Africans to get land in the West. But it's very easy for a Westerner Chinese to Africa. So, but I've come to realize the reason why is because of history. The West has already been depleted resource-wise. Reason being, they have had governments for a very long time. So all the land is basically already demarcated. This is why majority of Europeans live in apartments, houses, and they don't have what Africans have. Africans are very fortunate because they have land, even though they may live in the city. They have land in the rural areas. So they are double dealers or multiple dealers. But that's not the case in Europe. In Europe, people don't have land, and it's for historical reason. They have had organized government for thousands of years. Africa, even though it had organized government, not all African cultures were organized like a kingdom. Some were egalitarian and some were very independent, especially pastoralists. Pastoralists were very independent. They just had circumcision and age sets, but land was communally owned. The land was theirs, was for everybody. And because a pastoralist, there's no need to fence our land. So they just graze anywhere because the land is ours. But for farmers and kingdom people, they fence to protect their property. So you see, even what you're talking about, the colonizing country seeks to benefit from the colonized country or landmass. Are you seeing? And the game, even my skyscraper architecture is a bit weird because you cannot build a skyscraper without land. However, I think you can also build skyscrapers on the sea. Yes, on the seabed. We can put very strong metal struts in the sea and then use those metal struts to build skyscrapers up to the sky. Alternatively, you can even make submarine houses, like the underground houses people are building these days. Now, so colonizers go for land, and this is why the world is already done. That's why there's a space race, because the world has already been taken up. Governments now own land, people own land, and the colonialists have left the countries. So the land has gone to the government. So the governments now own land, and if it's not a government, people own land. So if you want to buy land from somebody, you either go to the government or the people. Now, many of the colonized countries were not countries at all prior to colonization. So that's what you need to know. And this is why we're doing this video. majority of third world countries are creations. They are colonial creations. Most countries, and I was discussing this with a friend yesterday, that most countries in the third world are conglomerations of various nations. So you find some countries have over 100 nations, like Nigeria has over 100 nations. Kenya has roughly 50 nations. But a country like Zimbabwe, they have less than 10 nations. Yes, constitutionally recognized to be Zimbabwean. And in Kenya, those who are constitutionally recognized to be Kenyan, it's around 40, 50. And Nigeria is 100 nations. They are constitutionally recognized to be nations. So it tells you, what does this tell you? That most countries in the third world are actually countries that are mixed up with very many countries. That's why tribalism is a big thing in Africa. It's not that it is there, it's because there are many languages, and every language is a tribe. Linguistically speaking, when there is a language, there is a tribe. Where there is a language, there is a tribe. So tribalism is the practice of discriminating against somebody who comes from another tribe other than yours. That's what you need to understand. That's why tribalism is there. Is because people, they don't speak the same language. They are not in the same network linguistically. You see. So these colonialists now put all of these languages into one unit called a country. That's what happened. In the process, colonizers imposed their religion, this is very important, economics, and medicinal practices on the natives. Though I disagree with that statement, because not all colonizers imposed their religion in their countries, or even their medicinal practices on their natives. That one is someone who is really writing generally, because France was a secular colonialist, and France did not really it only allowed people to become French by will, not by force, or by will or by persuasion. And the rest of the African tribes in the French colonies, they were free to be who they were, you know. That's why most French countries, colonies, they don't have anti-homosexuality laws, because for the French, they were colonizing Africa purely for economic reasons, and not for political or cultural reasons. But Britain was a monarchy, and not just a monarchy, a Christian theocracy. And because of that, the laws that were in England were Christian. It was a Christian Torah. It's a Christian Torah country. So this is a Torah. Torah means law in Jewish lingua, and the England, when it became, remember, England did not start as a Christian monarchy. You know, England was just a country of tribes, Celtic tribes, who are pagan worshippers. I mean, today, if you tell British people, show them what their forefathers were worshipping, they can even collapse. They were very pagan in their worship, until Rome colonized Britain. And when it colonized Britain, Christians from the Roman Empire went to preach the gospel to the British people, and they accepted the Christianity. And that's how the Christian kingdom was established in England and in very many European countries. Look at the flags of Denmark, Sweden, and England. These were, and Sweden, you know, Sweden has a yellow cross, and Britain has St. George's cross, and Scotland has St. Andrew's cross. All of these crosses, these were the religion, the Christianity of those days was very cross-minded. They loved the issue, the doctrine of the cross. So you find these Christian kingdoms in Europe have cross flags. Now, when you look at Islamic countries, majority of them have colors that are similar to Islamic countries. Reason being, they were colonized by Muslim countries, by Islam. Now, come to the Arab world. The Arab world was also colonized by Muhammad through Islam. Muhammad was not only a religious leader, he was a political leader. And he used Islam to set up an Islamic system. Before Muhammad and before Islam, peace be upon him, as they say, what happened is the Arab communities and the Arabic tribes were very polytheistic. They were worshipping gods, you know. They were very free. They were worshipping idols. Nothing had changed, because you have to understand about the Arab world, especially Iraq and Iran, which was Babylon. Arab world is a neighbor to Babylon. Abraham was a Babylonian, and he worshipped many gods. Now, when he worshipped many gods, he left Babylon, actually, and then went to Israel. And it's still his children, his grandchildren, that the nation of Israel was born. Now, he left Babylon. So Babylon had remained worshipping idols forever until Muhammad came. When Muhammad came, Saudi Arabia is a neighbor to Iraq, which is a Babylonian, is a Babylon, ancient Babylon and Mesopotamia. So Saudi Arabia had a similar religion with the Babylonians, and that is polytheism. This is why Allah is the name of a god that existed in the Arabic religion. Allah is not a new word to Islam. It was our god. One of the gods in the Arab world was called Allah. So Muhammad acquired that name and called the God of heaven Allah, which was a name that was already there. Then he colonized the Arab world. And remember, the Northern Africa was Christian. So Muhammad did a very big work in North Africa in conquering it, that the Christian civilization was destroyed, and the Muslim system was set up in North Africa. Then when Muhammad died. Then after dying, other Muslim leaders rose, and he had already set up a system, the Sharia system and everything. And so these Muslims gained strength and went to Spain, Turkey, and that's how these countries became Islamic. It's only in Spain, when the Christians in Europe realized that the Muslims were gaining strength, they pushed them back. And that's how the Islamic culture in Spain collapsed. The Moors were Muslims who ruled Spain for some time until the Christian civilization pushed them out of Spain. And the only country they did not take was Turkey. Turkey, they tried to remove the Muslims. It was too hard. And the Mamluks are the ones who remained in Turkey to rule. So, but basically North Africa became Islamic. So why am I going through that history? To show you colonization happens in very many, it has been happening for thousands of years, and it still doesn't stop. In fact, now it has just changed. We are having what you call cold colonialism, not hot colonialism. Hot colonialism is where you colonize people with fire, by force and arms. But cold colonialism is like the Cold War. You don't fight each other physically, but you fight each other, or you just engage with each other or in a friendly manner, and then you become like them. Like in Africa, there was also colonialism. Africans also colonized each other. Because remember the definition of colonialism: a policy over foreign polity. Africa has so many foreign polities. Too many. Everywhere you find a language, that's a polity. Now, in Africa, one of the people that were colonized was the Ndebele people in Zimbabwe. The Ndebele are actually Zulus who ran away from South Africa to settle in Zimbabwe. Now, when they went to Zimbabwe, they found Shona people. Now, Shona people tend to be very kind and soft-hearted. The Ndebele, being Zulus, are very aggressive. Majority of them. I don't want to be general. Majority of them are a bit aggressive. And, the warlike, they are warriors. So, the Ndebele, when they went to stay in Zimbabwe, they found Zimbabwe very nice. The country, green, many rivers, water, and minerals. And the Zimbabwean, the Shonas, had already built the great ruins of Zimbabwe. Very beautiful buildings. Now, so they stayed there. Now, when they stayed with the Shona, they didn't fight them, because a Shona is not a Ndebele, linguistically and politically. So they had to learn how to live together. So what happened is the Shona practiced cold colonialism on the Ndebele by giving them their religion, because the Shona believed in Mwari. This is the high god, the highest god. And that is what the Ndebele learned from the Shona. And the Ndebele also called their god Mwari. And they borrowed everything. And within a short time, the Ndebele became like Shona. And it was because the Shona practiced soft diplomacy. They had every right to fight them, because they were Zulus. And when you listen to Zulu language, it has some click sounds, which is not found in Shona. Shona tongue rarely has click sounds. It is all in Ndebele and Zulu. So that's one concept of African colonizing an African. Yes, it happened because you're foreign polity, meaning you're speaking a different language from each other. So some communities in Africa fought each other. Others assimilated each other. Others became one. Others merged. I also tell people, genetically speaking, there are some tribes that are just mixtures of two main tribes that existed, the Nilots and Bantus. There are some tribes which are just made up of a Nilot Y chromosome and a Bantu X chromosome, or Bantu mitochondria, sorry, because it's a mitochondria. So there are some tribes which are half castes, because the Nilots are Egyptian tribes and the Bantu are the Congo tribes that were based in Congo. But now genetically we are seeing they are very connected to the Arab people. Yes, most Congolese, the genetic group they belong, they are not so close, but they're in the same genetic haplogroup with Arab people. And not all Arabs. And then some Arabs are Jewish. Yes, it's very strange. Some Arabs are Jewish. They have the Jewish haplogroup. We'll do that in another time when we're talking. So anyway, I like history, so that's why I'm talking about it. So this is colonialism, and it can happen within people of the same race. It can happen within people of different races, as long as there's a foreign element. Now, what I wanted us to focus on, we don't want to stay here for so long, is the different colonialists in the world. As I've told you, very many people have been colonizing. Here they're telling us Phoenicians, then after that the Greeks, then Persians, then you have the Babylonians, they have not mentioned, then the Romans would soon follow. You see, Romans even colonized Africa, and they colonized Western Asia. Then after that, the Islamists also colonized the world. Ottomans, Venetians, Genovese, Amalfians. And then later on, now in the 15th century, very powerful discussion here. Europe started discussing power. I want us to see Phoenicians started. Then the Greeks and Persians started colonizing the world. Then Romans started. Then Islamists started. Then Venetians and Genovese, these are Italians, started. Then Europeans also started. And now we have the European colonial circle: Belgium, Britain, Denmark, Netherlands, French, Portugal, Russia, Spain, Sweden, and Imperial Japan, USA, and the Ottoman Empire also acquired colonies, as did imperialist China. And finally, in the late 19th century, the German and Italian. Now, what am I trying to show you here, so that we don't beat around the bush? I'm trying to show you diversity of colonization. The Belgian colonial system was not the British colonial system. Neither was it the Danish system. Neither was it the Dutch system. Neither was it the French. Neither was it the Portuguese. Neither was it Russian. Neither was it... Are you noticing the nationalistic nature of a colonial power? A colonial power must be a nation for it to colonize somebody. And all of these are nations. Germany is a nation. Italy is a nation. Remember, Germany could only start colonization when they became united. The unification of Germany in 1871 led to Germany to colonize the world. And actually, in my view, this is why World War I started. It was because of Germany. Germany was the cause of World War I and World War II, because it was a powerful nation that was united in 1871 and was very thirsty for power. It was the last colonial power to really try and get into the colonial race. You know, Britain was already there. Imagine Britain even had a colony called America that became an independent before even Germany was united. So these other colonial guys were already there. You know, they have already been doing it. And even the Italian colonization was not necessarily new, because Rome had already been colonizing the world. And it's beautiful. Why I like Roman Empire, the Roman Empire. Rome is a city. It is not a country. That's the beautiful thing about the Roman Empire. It was a city. It is not a country. You see, these other people, these are colonial, these are national colonizers or nationalist colonizers. And then you have some colonizers who are monarchies. Imperial China, Imperial Japan, the Ottoman Empire. Then the Romans, they were the city of Rome. So that was a city colonizer. So one city colonized most of the world. Beautiful subject we are studying. And Phoenicians were just a people. And Greeks was just a language or a people. But the Roman Empire was a city empire. A city that controlled the world. And it's still controlling the world today. Unbelievable. All roads lead to Rome. It hasn't changed. Some want to go to Jerusalem. Anyway, so at first, European countries followed policies of mercantilism in order to strengthen the home economy. You see, so the whole basis of colonization was economic. They wanted their home economy strong. Even the Roman Empire, that's how they used to run. They wanted to make money for home economy. You know, life was good. Oh, if you had a house in Rome during the Roman Empire, my God, sauna, jacuzzi, all of these things, they came from Rome. Going to the gym, sex orgies, they were all happening in Rome, the city of Rome. So they needed the life to continue. Mansions, beautiful. Go and read Roman history and look at the pictures. Thoroughly beautiful. So they were wealthy. And so to keep the wealth, they needed more territory. They needed to buy more things. They needed to sell to other countries. That's why they colonized. Now, I want us to focus on the second part of this video is the British Empire. Because the British Empire gave up mercantilism and trade restrictions and adopted the principle of free trade with few restrictions or tariffs. Christian missionaries were active in practically all of the colonies because the colonialists were Christians. Though I thoroughly disagree with that one, especially when it comes to French colonization, because the French were not necessarily... The Christian missionaries took advantage of the colonial powers, not because they were Christian, but because they were the same nationality. So you'll find most of the time, French missionaries went to French colonies. British missionaries went to British colonies. However, there are some few cases whereby there was mix of missionaries of different nationalities going to different colonial states that didn't belong to their nationality. So that's what I'm trying to... Because they're saying because the colonialists were Christians. But I think what they're trying to say, the European colonialists were Christian. That's what they're trying to say. And on that basis, yes, they are right to say that. But I want us to look at the French colonization. Okay, let's first look at the types of colonialism. There's settler colonialism. There's exploitation colonialism. There's surrogate colonialism. This is where a settlement project supported by colonial power. And they have... It's like a replacement settlement, you know. And then you have internal colonialism. It's a notion of uneven structural power between areas of a state. So there are some areas in a state that are so rich and they end up colonizing the poor areas of that country. And internal colonialism is actually an offshoot of external colonialism, because colonialism is naturally based on the having one person up on top. Yes, it's a monarchy. And then this monarchy sets up power in a certain place. This is why capital cities, capitalism is basically monarchical. Yes, because a capital city means the head city, the top city. So what happens is majority of people live in the top city because there is money. Now, the problem of the capitalist system is it creates this uneven structural power because most money, aka capital, is found in one place. Now, because it's found in one place, majority of the places that are not near the capital suffer because they are far from power. They are far from the system. That's why I like the American system, because all the 50 states have capitals. But all of these capitals surrender to one capital called Washington, D.C. So you don't really have to live in Washington, D.C. You can stay in ways, let's see, like, let me see a state like, Dallas. Yes, Dallas is the capital of Texas. I don't need to go and live in Washington, D.C. to be rich. I can stay in Dallas. It's a capital city of a state in the country called America. So that's where America scored in becoming a very powerful country. It created 50 Americas. And they are all in one America called USA. But there are actually 50 Americas. Do you know America competes with Africa? Yes, they do, because America has 52 countries. Africa has 52 countries, roughly 52, 54. And America has 50 countries. They are just the same. Do you know China? The reason why China is a problem is because they don't have the American system is not theirs. Actually, China is more of a monarchy. Yes, because, and this is what Xi Jinping is going through. He's going through hell or problems. These days we don't have hell. Is because the reason is China is not a federal republic, even though they have states. It's a unitary country. So when you're unitary, it's just a monarchy. That's all. America is not a monarchy, even though it has monarchical tendencies, because it has one president who rules the whole country, just like a king rules a whole kingdom. And I'm very happy. I like the King James Version of the Bible because it discusses power very well. And in the Babylonian system, they used to have presidents, and presidents served under kings. So this president system, in my view, is actually, if you're a president, you're actually serving a king. Because a king is a very powerful person. Because they have no opposition whatsoever. They are reigning. They don't have to go through an election. You see, a president goes through an election. There's no president who is there because his father was a president. So he will become a president directly. There's no direct succession in a democracy or in a presidential system. There is only a election that takes place so that the president comes in. But in a monarchy, no succession battle. Everybody knows. In England, they already know who is going to be the next monarch after Queen Elizabeth II. Yes, they all know who it will be. And they know who is going to be after the successor. Actually, they make me laugh. They already have the list of all successors, just in case anything happens to anybody. So anyway, that is colonization. And I want us to go to France, because France is a bit different. Because when France even started colonizing, they did not really carry religion. And this is the reason why we want to discuss about what is happening in countries like Kenya and already happened in India. French colonial empire constituted the overseas colonies, protectorates, and mandate territories that came under French rule from the 16th century onward. a distinction is made between the first colonial empire that existed until 1814, by which time most of it had been lost, and the second colonial empire, which began with the conquest of Algiers in 1830. So we are focusing on the second colonial empire. And the French, you see where they went? And look at France. They didn't have ships to travel to South Africa. So they just stayed in Western Africa, because it's very close to, you see how France is close to West Africa? And even in the past, before the Syrian immigration to Europe, majority of Africans, the high immigration was from West Africa to France because of the French colonial system that was in West Africa. And so that's how Syria, that's why now the immigration story is not about black people, which used to take place in 1960s, 70s, 80s. It is now because of the focus is now on the Arab or Syrian immigration that just began the moment Islamic terror raised its ugly head, and not only Islamic terror but dictatorships in the Arab world. So you see the colors here, they're showing you the second colonial empire after 1830. So it is only America, part of America and Canada, that France colonized in 1534. And then there's some parts of India that France also colonized in the first colonial empire. Then the second colonial empire, that was after 1830. And weird enough, when you're going to read the history of France, these colonizations always happened when France had a monarchy. You will see. We are here today to study this. And you can see the capital was France, upper house Bourbon, and Bonaparte, or Bonaparte. The Napoleon. So conquest of Algeria, French Union, French Community, independence of Vanuatu, and all of that, succeeded by overseas French. Now, are you seeing the major? This is what I'm telling you. Some countries were not just going to colonize for economics. A major goal was mission civilisatrice, the mission to spread French culture, language, and religion, and this proved successful. In 1884, Jules Ferry declared, "The higher races have a right." The higher races have a right over the lower races. They have a duty to civilize the inferior races. I'm just laughing at how he wrote this. It's just he declared. Oh goodness, so funny that they have a right. No, it was not really a right. It was just an advantage. They just wanted to. They knew they were going to gain. See, there was a duty to civilize the inferior races, and that's the problem we are having with all of that jargon. And that's why when we talk about colonialism, many Africans or third world persons feel very affected, because they know it galvanizes or it emboldens inferiority complex, because these guys, sincerely, they were superior in military might. But what people need to understand about superiority, there is diversity of superiority. Some people are diverse are superior in certain things, and others are inferior in other things. But the inferior people are superior in certain things than these people who are superior in another thing. Like, for example, in Africa, I have noticed something about black Africans. They are, and therefore we are, but I'm talking as a neutral person, even though I'm black. The black Africans are thoroughly great artists. Thoroughly. The arts, I don't know which race can beat blacks in arts. It's just great. And what I mean by that is, look at America. Jazz music is the father of most music in America, including rock and roll. Rock and roll is so black in origin because rock and roll was a black. What makes rock and roll is the rhythm, which was borrowed from jazz. It was modified, and jazz is mainly a rhythmic music which was borrowed from the African music that was taken to America, and they had a syncopated beat, the offbeat, that one, and it was not the straight beat of the European of marching, ta 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 ta. That one is a straight beat, but the syncopated one is not a straight one. It starts with a weak beat, ta pa, and so that's what American music is all about. It comes from Africa, the African slaves that were taken to America. So you see, when it comes to music and arts, black people are superior. Yes. But when it comes to maybe things like manufacturing of things and mechanics, you can give credit to the Europeans. But what I'm trying to tell you is that nobody can claim that they are wholly superior over somebody. Yes, there is something you can learn from these so-called inferior races. Yes, and that's why I'm saying African arts, black arts are very, very, very scientific. And arts is science. It's in fact, it's the highest science, because arts do not have rules. Like, even when you listen to jazz music, jazz music is not rule. There is no rule. There is nothing right or wrong in jazz music. It just has to sound good. And when you hear that, you just say, wow. But when you look at it in the legal sense of music, basically the rules that have been broken are too many. Because when you listen to European music, it is so regular. There is no irregular rhythm. Irregularity was seen as very messy, and chaos was seen as not beautiful. But in African art, chaos is beauty, because you are expressing something. You are expressing something, and it sounds nice. Not all chaos sounds bad, So that's what. So I'm just laughing at Yule's declaration. Basically, you're just trying to say we are coming to conquer you. That's a nice way of. He was trying to use the PR of the colonialists, just telling them, no, we're just going there to help those people become like us. Of course, that was not what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to come and understand the people in those countries. Now, I just wanted to check that. And the Second French Colonial Empire, it began under Charles X, you see. And that's what you need to know. Napoleon III, he established French rule, and then he created a new ministry, navy, blah blah blah. So basically, why I'm talking about France, I don't see a lot of Christianity, but come to think of it, they carried Christianity to their colonies, but they were not so heavy. I think they were very Catholic, because this is the time the French kingdom, of course, after Napoleon died, the French restored monarchism for a short time. Let's look at that. Now our focus is really on France. French monarchy. It's very important to talk about this. The French monarch, list of French monarchs. So the monarchy of France, it fell in 1870. So our focus is going to be from 1815 to 1870. So you can see Louis, then 18. This is the guy we're looking for. We're looking for Napoleon III, and he was a nephew of Napoleon I, and he was the emperor of the French Empire. Then you have later pretenders. I just like the title. Various pretenders. Let's see what these pretenders means. Pretender is one who maintains or is able to maintain a claim that they are entitled to a position of honor or rank, which may be occupied by an incumbent, usually more recognized, or whose powers may currently be exercised by another person of authority. Most often it refers to a former monarch or descendant thereof whose throne is occupied or claimed by a rival or has been abolished. I like the term pretender. All right. So the very, very interesting. So the French monarchy was actually, so what are we learning? We are learning that monarchies tend to be colonialists. And as I said about the Roman Empire, it's the weirdest empire because it was a city empire. Yes, it was a city that Rome controlled practically 2/3 of the world, because when they were in power, because imagine what a very powerful city. And this is what even made the Holy Roman Empire a very powerful empire, because the Roman Empire, when it began imperializing or conquering the world, it was secular or polytheistic or pantheistic. It was a pantheistic colonial power, meaning they respected every religion they found and only had a problem with religions that fought their power. So do you know why Christianity was a persecuted religion at its beginning? It was a political religion. Christianity was a political religion. Please understand, this is why we are fighting very many anti-homosexuality laws. It is because of that. These countries were politically, the Christian nations that have these laws against gay people is because they have those laws because of their religion, not because of the culture, but because of religion. Now, when the Roman Empire controlled most of the world, they did not impose their religion of worshipping Saturn, worshipping Mercury, worshipping the planets. Basically, the planets we have are Roman and Greek gods. So that's what you need to understand. So it was a pantheistic colonial power until Christianity became the official religion of Rome. Then Rome, from the time it became a Christian city, it then changed all its colonies to become Christian. So how Europe became Christian? They became Christian because the Roman Empire became Christian. So colonizers sometimes can carry their religion to other countries. But other countries, but not all colonizers carry their religion. Like these days, China is a colonial power in a very soft way. They are not necessarily colonial, but their game, people are beginning to smell colonialism, because if you get a Chinese loan and you don't pay it, you become theirs. You become theirs because they acquire the assets of that country. Of course, it hasn't begun. China is really not colonizing. It's just playing economics. If you want a loan from it, they will give you. I mean, EU has the biggest creditor in Europe is China. Yes. So Europe is basically beholden to China. And if they don't pay their debt, then China will take over Europe. Guess who is also the biggest creditor in America? It's China. You see how rich China is? So China is really not colonizing. It's just saying it's a creditor. So what we could be having is a new type of colonialism called the creditor colonialism, or credit colonialism, whereby a creditor can take over a country on the basis of the debt you have with them. So that could be a clever way of colonizing a country. That because this country is indebted to you, you now can enslave them. You can now tell them what to do. You can tell them what type of economic system they want them to run. Because basically, if China is so good at giving loans, people should ask themselves, what is China doing economically that we are not doing? You see? And you will now go and ask China. You know what happened recently? African leaders went to China. Yes, I clap for them, because they went to ask, you guys are having so much money. You are crediting, you're loaning, giving loans to Europe, giving loans to Africa, giving loans to America. What are you doing? So, when you see African leaders, there was a nice cartoon about African leaders running to China. Very nice one. And it's understandable. It's because they are realizing China knows how to make money. So, what has happened? China is actually going to influence very many countries who have loans with them to look like them. You see? To practice the same economic system like them. That's what you need to understand. The reason why if the West can only win, because the West is competing with China, reason being, most African countries are Western creations, including China. China is not necessarily a Western creation. It is a country, an independent country, that has managed to mix and create a system that borrows from the West. So it's a westernized independent country, but it's not a colonial creation, because China even had an empire. So they were just good at borrowing from the West, and weird enough, they borrowed from both the Western left through communism and capitalism at the fall of Mao Zedong, and the introduction of democracy, and also Hong Kong leaving China, mainland China. So the Chinese started reading about capitalism. That's why they changed. If China was a mad country, the countries can be mad. If it was a mad country, China would have been communist. But it is capitalist, because they realized communism is not a good system for making money. Communism is based on egalitarian political systems where people sit together and discuss democracy. Yes, that's why most democratic countries can fall into the trap of communism, because in a democracy it is people deciding, but in a monarchy or a dictatorship only one man is deciding. So when it's one man deciding, can you imagine driving a car where you have 3 drivers? It's disaster. The car will go in different directions, confusion, chaos. But when you have a country that has one driver, there is order because it is one driver. There is no chaotic direction it's going. So this is what China did. Now China borrowed capitalism, and look at what has happened to China. The moment they borrowed capitalism from the West, or they synonized capitalism, they became the richest country in the world. It has the largest human capital with over 1 billion people, and it has made money. It has made use of that human capital. Don't be deceived. You can have many people, but you can remain poor. Yes. Don't be deceived. But the advantage of a large population is, if you make good use of it, you will become very rich very fast. And that's what has happened to China. They have the whole of Europe cannot even fit in China. Can fit in China, and still there is space, because Europe's population is roughly 800 million. So they can be put in China. Can you imagine? And in China, it's only roughly 60% who are above 70% who are above the poverty line. That's a success story that should be sung for years, because imagine 70% of 1 billion people are not living in poverty. 70% of 1 billion people. Now what happens when there will be 100%? China will leave the whole world. So this is why people need to watch out what's happening in China. And this is why there's a lot of problems between America and China, because these are colonial powers fighting for the few resources in the world. You see, that's why you should really watch out what's happening in America. If I was the American president, I would open the floodgates of immigration and make America have 1 billion people immediately. Trump doesn't know how many people love that country and are willing to work there. You see, it's so sad. They should, if they're competing with China, America needs 1 billion people now. And it's possible. If they just say, green card open, we are opening the borders. Come to America, whoever wants to work in America. We are putting companies, we are putting things. Come to America. No problem. Visa will deal with everything. You just come to the country. No, they just relax the immigration restrictions. Let me tell you, within 2 years, America will have 1 billion people, minus reproduction. Yes. And do you know what's going to happen? That's minus reproduction. So what does that mean? Within 100 years, 1.1 billion people will be in America. No, there are now 300 million. So when you add 1 billion to 300 million, you will have 1.3 billion. Now tell me whether America will not pass China. And tell me whether America will not pay its debt. It will pay within a short time. So this is the game of numbers. Politics is a game of numbers. Government is a game of numbers. And if you're a country that has high debt, relax immigration to pay the debt very fast. Yes, that's how you do it. This is what I always tell African countries, that you will only succeed when you allow investors to come into your country. Yes. Investors will come, they create jobs, the country becomes urbanized. In fact, it's very easy to to make Africa rich. Yes. Very easy. Because even Africa has 1 billion people. About 1 billion people. Or 900 million people. So what does that mean? That's very good human capital. But the problem with Africa, it has very many people, but restricted. I mean, the capital is weak. All right. So let's continue. We are still talking about colonization, and I was talking about China. You can see how we can wax lyrical about that country. And it's the new colonial power that is doing wonders, and it's upsetting the economy, but not so much so, because the reason why China is not really affecting us is because it is China is not affecting us is because as a country it has as a country China is doing what? It is a Western system, so it's not really affecting us as it would have. Had it been, in fact, the system that can affect the world is the Islamic system, because Islamic finance is not Western system, because they don't practice interest economics, which is what China is practicing. Yes, China is not for information, it's not practicing Islamic finance. So the loans are still Western financed. And that's why we need to study. You need to study the Arab world to know how they finance themselves in a Western world. Because Arab countries I don't know how they do it, how they borrow. And I'm going to look at that. I was seeing some numbers about that borrowing, but we'll do that later on. Or maybe you can do it now before we come back talking about colonial laws, repealing colonial laws. And that is Arab world and debt finance. You see how colonialism can take us to every area because it's economics. So IMF is here doing this about debt of developing countries. Let's look at this. I like Wikipedia for the numbers. Okay. By country. Yes, this is what I wanted. So there is a public debt of USA, 64%. And America, 74%, so 31%. So the world, the public debt of the world is 56 trillion, and that is 64% of the world's GDP. So the world is in danger. The world is more indebted than credited, because 64% of its GDP is debt. And that's what we need to know about the world. So the total debt in the world is 56 trillion. Now, of this 56 trillion, USA has 31% of that 56 trillion, which is $17 trillion, then followed by Japan. I want you to look at the countries: Japan, China, Germany, Italy, France, UK, Brazil, Spain, Canada, India, Mexico, South Korea, Turkey. Now, Turkey is the first Islamic country, and its debt is 0.9% of the world debt, but of their GDP it is 69%. Oh, 40%, sorry. Look at Egypt. So what I'm laughing at is that these countries that call themselves, well, most of the Islamic ones, look at Pakistan, 50%. So why I'm trying to talk about this is I want us to find out how Islamic countries borrow from Western finance countries, because they do not like interest loans. But you can already see IMF is attacking China, is attacking those countries, Arab world and interest debt. You see, they're being blamed. I think IMF has a Middle. They have said IMF has a Middle East and Central Asia department, so it may mean there's a way they relax them, but it cannot be so when interest rates are rising and these are Arab states. So we're going to read that Arab news thing article. So you see, this Islamic belief banking, Islamic law prohibits interest payments on debt. So groups help finding alternatives. Yeah, this is what I was looking for. And okay. So let's try and let's read this. No, we won't read this one. This is personal banking. Let's read this one from Dechwela. Arab states need to address debt issue. IMF has warned Arab nations against complacency over the looming debt crisis. It urged greater reforms, saying the current rise in oil prices should not prompt delay. Okay, that one is frozen. So let me ask, do Arab countries pay interest on their national debt? That's what we need to ask. I hope Google has the answer. We'll have Google for that. No. They haven't given us the crisis, the debt crisis. You see, Egypt, Muslim country, but they have debt and it's in interest, and it's the interest. Interest is what makes debt ugly. Can you imagine a situation whereby you pay? You see, that's what happens in Islamic finance. You don't pay interest, you just pay back the debt. But as I said in another video, I'm here to do that discussion properly. It's a subtle way. They still get money from you because the price of the property you have borrowed from them to get increases. So if you don't pay back the loan, they are even going to be richer because they'll sell back the land or the security or the property you bought using the loan at a higher price. So basically, nobody does non-interest finance. Everybody practices interest finance. It's just that in the Islamic world, it is subtle. They don't declare. Rather, there is no interest, but they will still make profit out of you. Yes, especially if you don't pay the loan. Okay, they are not so clear about it. They are still talking about that issue of debt. I just wanted to see whether Arab countries pay interest. They do. Okay, let's finish our work. So we were saying Repeal 162 is one of the measures. First of all, let's go to India and see what the section of their penal code did. It was section 177, if I'm not wrong. Oops, sorry about that. I added 7. Was it 177? Nope. Sorry. Forgotten the section on homosexuality. Yeah, section 377. Sorry about that. So in the Indian section 377 that has been abolished, it was a section of the Indian Penal Code, and let's read it. Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code is a section of the Indian Penal Code introduced in 1864 during the British rule of India and modeled on the Bagari Act of 1533. It is used to criminalize sexual activities against the order of nature. But on September 6, 2018, the Supreme Court of India ruled the application as unconstitutional, irrational, indefensible, and manifestly arbitrary. Yes, it was, but the section remains in force relating to sex with minors, non-consensual sex acts, and bestiality. Of course, that's what they've said, but basically for homosexual sex, it has been declared unconstitutional. That's what decriminalizers do. We seek just a declaration of the unconstitutionality of a section, because when a section of the law is against the constitution, then it is null and void. And homosexual sex is a private matter, and the constitution protects privacy. It's as simple as that. So they did very well, but I want us to focus on the colonial heritage. So look at this, the Bagari Act 1533, an act of the punishment of the vice of Bagari under Henry VIII, the king we have been talking about. An act, I want us to read. We know why I'm reading this. It tells you these guys were very busy hogging each other. Yes, because there is no way you can write about these things and they are not happening. Even Israel, gay sex has been with us forever, and it happened in Israel. Moses had to pass the law, but even though he passed it, people were still doing it. So what is this thing? Humans are so infatuated with fighting gay people. It's just... So the act was piloted through Henry's minister, Thomas Cromwell, and punished the detestable and abominable vice of Bagari committed with mankind or beast. Bagari was not further defined in the law. I really want to read the law. Now listen to this. The offenders being hereof convicted by verdict, confession or outlawry shall suffer such pains of death and losses and penalties of their good chattels, debts, lands, tenements, and hereditaments, as felons do according to the common laws of this realm. And no person offending in any such offense shall be admitted to his clergy. You see, the clergy belonged to the king in that time of England. This meant that a convicted sodomite's possessions could be confiscated by the government. Murderers were kept, but a sodomite was killed, especially the priests and the monks. Henry later used the law to execute monks and nuns, thanks to information his spies had gathered, and take their monastery lands, the same tactics that had been used 200 years before by Philip IV of France, Knights Templar. So you see what happened? And what were the Knights Templar accused of? Homosexuality. And what was Henry accusing the monks and nuns? And you know, Henry was doing this because the Catholic Church had broken links and ranks and connections with England because of what he did, marrying. So he said, okay, good. Now I'm going to find the sodomites. And I think he knew the monks and nuns were gay. So thanks to his spies, Henry was such a king. It's just his story. And he really looks his... When you look at Henry's picture, he really looks what he did. So, in July 1540, are you seeing what happened? Walter Hungerford, the first Baron of Heytesbury, was charged with treason for harboring a non-member of Pilgrim of Grace movement. Although he had been married 3 times and had 4 children, he was also accused of buggery. Hungerford was beheaded at Tower Hill on July 28, 1540, the same day as Thomas Cromwell. Now, the funny thing about this story, Thomas Cromwell was the minister who passed the law against buggery, and he was killed on the same day when a burgher called Walter Hungerford was also executed. Unbelievable. King Henry was a very mad king for that reason. Nicholas Udall, a cleric playwright and a headmaster of Eton College, was the first to be charged with the violation of the Act alone in 1541 for sexually abusing his pupils. In his case, he was committed to imprisonment and he was released in less than a year. He went on to become the headmaster of Westminster School. So in the 16th century, the act was repealed on accession of the staunchly Catholic Queen Mary, who preferred such legal matters adjudicated in ecclesiastical courts. You see how Queen Mary was good? She was, of course, she's the Bloody Mary because of the way she killed Protestants. But at least she understood that things like buggery do not need to be judged by the government, but could be dealt with by the church courts. Because in the past, in England, the courts, there were 2 types of courts. Ecclesiastical courts, these were courts run by churches, and the secular courts, these were run by the kingdom. However, it was reenacted by Queen Elizabeth I. Although homosexual prosecutions throughout the 16th century were sparse, and fewer than a dozen prosecutions are recorded up to through 1660, this may reflect inadequate research into the subject, as scarcity of extant legal records. So sadly, Queen Elizabeth's time, they were not writing anything. They were sparse, and I think people were very clever to hide. And you find Mervyn Touchet, the second Earl of Castlehaven, was beheaded because of his rank. You see how many people died through beheadings? Even if the charge of sodomy was reduced for lack of evidence to a charge of an attempted buggery, the penalty was severe: imprisonment and some time on the pillory. The lesser punishment to be stood in the pillory was by no means a lenient one, for the victims often had to fear for their lives at the hands of an enraged multitude with brick bats, as well as filth and curses. The victims in the pillory, male or female, found themselves at the center of an orgy of brutality and mass hysteria, especially if the victim were a molly. Yes, a molly is a feminine, homosexual or gay or man. They always faced the brunt of brutality and mass hysteria. Periodicals of the time sometimes casually named non-sodomites, and at one point even suggested that sodomy was increasing popular. Are you seeing newspapers those days? They were doing the same hype. Yes, the same hype that happened in countries like Uganda and other homophobic countries. This does not imply that sodomites necessarily lived in security. In Rex versus Samuel Jacobs, 1817, it was concluded that fellatio between an adult man and an underage boy was not punishable under this act. The courts had previously established in Rex versus Richard Weissman in 1716 that heterosexual sodomy was considered buggery under the meaning of the 1533 Act. Yes, so even men who practice sodomy with women, or women who practice sodomy with men, which, and for your information, sodomy does not only include anal, it even includes oral sex. It was considered buggery. And in the light of R versus Jacobs, Rex means king, and Regina, if it's a queen in power, it is Regina. That's why in this one, in the light of R versus Jacobs, they never used to want to write Regina because of patriarchy. So this was Queen Victoria was ruling. Fellatio thus remained legal until the passage of La Bouchere Amendment in 1885, which added the charge of gross indecency to the traditional term of sodomy. And the last two Englishmen who were hanged for sodomy were executed in 1835 when Joseph Pratt and John Smith died in front of the Newgate prison in London on November 27th. The repeal happened in 1828, and it was repealed by the Section of Offences Against the Person Act 1828, and all of that. And buggery remained a capital offence in England until the enactment of the Offences Against Persons Act, and the United Kingdom Parliament repealed buggery laws for England and Wales in 1967, insofar as they related to consensual homosexual acts in private, 10 years after the Wolfenden Report. Legal statutes in many former colonies have retained them, such as the Anglophone Caribbean. But as we have said, the changes are happening now, and it is going to be the decriminalization of the homosexuality by many Commonwealth countries is going to happen. And we want to show you, like here, the Repeal 162 is one of them. And so this, of course, India has already done it through Repeal 377, and it has been repealed. And I believe also in Kenya they will also do the same on the basis of the Constitution, and because the Constitution is a supreme law. And when you have a law that is against the Constitution, you cannot, it has no power, and that's why this repealing is going to happen. So you can come and visit this website. I will leave it here for you, and we are very happy we've discussed about colonization and its power and how it influences people it's a control measure, because colonization is a programming system. It's a very spiritual act, and that's why Africans it's not a very easy work, because Africans are a colonized people who have now been independent, but trying to live in independence. So that's what we want to do, that by repealing these colonial laws we can win. I always tell people there is no point. You got independence from colonialists. Why do you still uphold their laws? And especially laws that are so bad and so inhuman and are violation of human rights. For information, when the colonialists ruled Africa and the third world, they had no constitution. America was a colony. It had no constitution before their independence. Independent countries create constitutions so that they can rule themselves. And that's what we are saying also for all these countries that were colonized, that we need to destroy or remove laws that are detrimental to human rights of people. And that is because when colonialists came to your country, they didn't come with humanistic desires. They came with to crush you. And so the only way you can deal with that, fighting that crushing, is repealing such laws. So you can visit this website, repeal162.org, and that is our discussion, and we'll keep you posted as things go on. Okay, see you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today.